I think we had 40,000 units in total for our first buy. That was with no customer, no website. We had no distribution. And Sunscreen has an expiry date. If you don't sell it within 2 or 3 years, you have to throw it out. So there was a ticking time bomb of how long that stock could be around.
Know what problem you're solving. Don't just put shit into market because you want to make some money. And again, look at the competitive landscape. If there's 10 other brands solving the exact same problem as you, it's pretty telling.
You don't just push hard enough once at the start. You have to do it multiple.
Every day.
Is that the right retailer? Is that where we should be going? Our first international expansion, is that right? Is that where should we go? We're still doing that now.
Before we dive in, I want to extend a warm invitation to join our thriving Foundr community. It's the perfect place to discover more insightful interviews aimed at helping you build, grow, and scale your business. So don't forget to hit subscribe. Your support means the absolute world to us. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's get stuck in today's discussion.
Hear the stories, learn the proven methods, and accelerate your growth and future through entrepreneurship. Welcome to the Foundr Podcast with Nathan Chan.
We're in the studio. Bec, Ava, thank you so much for joining us. I was going to say, the first question that I usually ask is, how did you get your job? But we're changing that up. We're changing that up. You guys were waiting for it, right? You're waiting for it. Yeah. So the first question I'd now ask is, can you describe the first 60 days of Ultra Violette?
Like from day dot?
Yeah, what do we count as?
Yeah, I don't know, because
time point zero.
Time point zero, probably day launch day.
No, I reckon from when you guys both sat down and said, you know what?
Okay.
We're going to do this.
Okay.
What did the first 60 days look like?
The first 60 days, well, we obviously had conversations in the lead up, and Bec was my boss, so I guess I don't know what I was thinking, proposing a business idea that would take us both out of the jobs we were currently in. We obviously had a good relationship, but I must have known that you would have been receptive to it. And we said we should do this. And then, Bec was at a very different stage of her life. She had 2 small children, mortgage. I was late 20s, nothing, just paying rent in an apartment in South Yarra. And so that was, day dot. And then I think there was a bit of time in between that first conversation and the second one, probably not much, maybe a week or so. And then it was a bit more of a serious lunch, and it was like, okay, let's think about how we could potentially do this. And then
so that lunch is day one. That's what you're counting?
Yeah, I guess so. Day one, so 7 days after the initial scoping conversation.
Yeah.
And then we spent probably the next 60 days in Bec's living room on a whiteboard, like just ideating the brand and looking at everything from names to products to concepts of what we're positioning, how much money we'd need.
Product cost of goods, targets, retailer distribution plans, how much money we were willing to earn or not earn, and for how long, everything. We really dug into everything. That was, and this was still like forming, I guess. It's hard to count, is that the first 60 days, because at any one of those days we could have both pulled out and said, actually, this is not for me. So like every single day was another step towards, are we serious? Are we serious? And the more that idea formed, and maybe it's testament to the kind of people, well, definitely me, like I needed to see it working out on paper, think of all of the things, and then I could really jump in. So there was no commitment from either of us at that point in time, but it was forming.
Yeah. Okay. So you launched in 2019.
Mm-hmm. That was 2016. All that activity.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So it took 3 years to bring the product to life.
2.5.
2.5. Okay. You both worked together at Mecca. You guys had an unfair advantage.
Yeah, we did.
Right? But that's what you go with, right? Like you play a game that you think you're going to win. That's business. right?
We had an unfair advantage, but we'd also spent our entire careers getting us to a point where we had an unfair advantage.
In other
And credit to you guys, credit to you guys, yeah.
But yes, we definitely knew the ropes, I think, a lot better than some other founders do, and maybe that wasn't a good thing. Maybe it was a great thing.
Yeah, I think it we knew what questions we needed to have answers to. And so in that first ideating 60 days, we knew the pillars that we had to fill, but there was still a whole lot that we didn't know. Now 5.5 years later, there were lots of things we didn't even think to workshop and talk about, but we knew enough to get going. And I think an unfair advantage or, expertise coming to fruition or, a passion for something that had been proven, these are kind of all launching off points that 3 or 2.5 years after that came to the launch date. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of time, not just 60 days before we got to launch.
Yeah, got you. But 2.5 years is a long time.
It is.
Right? For me when I created Foundr, I had extreme naivety. No idea about publishing, print, digital, marketing, product, not even about entrepreneurship, right? It was extreme naivety. And that took me, I'd say about 6 to 9 months to go, yep, I'm going to do this, purchase the software, produce the magazine, find someone on the equivalent of Upwork.
Yeah.
And whatever, and it was a disaster, but I still launched it. It's so embarrassing. Made $5.50 in the first day, 2 subscribers. But back to you guys, 2.5 years. What happened in those 2.5 years, especially around the product development phase? Because that's a long time.
Yeah. So we obviously we had the ideation session, a really thorough business planning. We needed to leave our employer. We had to get out.
You couldn't do it on the side.
No,
we
that
didn't
wouldn't
feel
have
right
been fair.
about that.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yep.
So we quit our well-paying jobs and left, and that was also as I kept the commitment was building.
Yes.
And so we didn't start the product development process until after that point. So there was a very clean break. And then it takes a long time. And sunscreen, so our products we call them skinscreen, a combination of skincare and sunscreen. But that sunscreen part is really tough in Australia to get a TGA approved. So the Therapeutic Goods Administration has to validate that an SPF 50 really means something robust. So I think too, our idea wasn't about launching a brand with sunscreen. It was really about changing a category. So sunscreen had traditionally been in mass channels, so available in supermarkets or drugstores and pharmacies. And consequently, all of the base formulations were suited to that low-cost environment. There was not a thought about making things feel nice on your face. It was all formulated to be, or not all, but mostly formulated to be easy to apply on your body in the summer months that you take to the beach, in packaging that you didn't really care about because it was at the bottom of a beach bag or on vacation.
You're going to pay $5 for it.
And it was the lowest cost formulating environment. So the first challenge, and why that 2 years started to ebb away so quickly, was trying to find a formulation base that would meet our premium beauty aspirations for this brand. And when you're trying to change a category, they didn't exist, those formulations. So we really had to work very hard in finding what we could start with and then really adjust and tweak and work on elevating those formulations so that they were appropriate for our vision of transporting the category. And that's just the goop in the middle. You then try and overlay onto that packaging that's rightfully going to sit on the shelves of a prestige beauty retailer and in someone's vanity that looked elegant and beautiful. That was another whole product development process. And then obviously the branding, the tone of voice, the language, when you're creating something that hasn't existed before and wasn't at a level before, that had to overlay. So there were lots of streams working together, but it wasn't like going to a contract manufacturer, sourcing a formulation, chucking a label on it and putting it out to market.
And also we were still working pretty much full-time. I was full-time, you were 4 days in this period. So I guess it gave us the windows that we had to work on this were, Bec's 1 day a week and my after work on weekends, etc., where I was kind of working on the brand development. So it wasn't, we kind of took you hear entrepreneurs say, I just dove in and probably quite similar to you, just figured it out. You did it in a short period. We were a little bit more cautious. And I think we probably needed to be like, you couldn't just chuck it all in, not have a job for 9 months or a year while we were working through this. And I
don't know if we had have been full-time, I don't know how much we could have truncated that lead time. Like maybe we could have shaved 6 months off it.
Yeah, true.
We definitely couldn't have done it in 3 months.
No.
And so how long can you go without any income before you then have a business where you're not going to earn an income?
Yeah. It was probably minimum 18 months, I'd say, based on what we needed to do. And then, we had to build a website and all of those things that we had never done before. Yeah.
And when it's just the two of you, you really, are relying on what skills can I scrape from the bottom of the barrel and try and mold into a role.
Yeah, got you. So you guys did leave your job. So what time period was that?
That was early 2017. Once we'd established that we were going to do this. So we had 6 months in the middle of 2016 to the beginning of 2017. We had 6 months. We worked on the business plan. We stress tested the idea. We shared it with a few kind of trusted people.
Colleagues.
No, not colleagues. People we weren't telling anyone.
Okay.
We were very,
stealth.
Yeah, very stealth.
Okay.
We just didn't want any. We wanted feedback, but we didn't want anything to kind of stop us at this point that we were still kind of a bit starry-eyed about the concept.
It's not fully formed either.
No.
I think we needed to think it all through.
Yeah. So we just shared it with a couple of people we thought were smart in business.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to go a bit deeper on the formulation side because that's the part that I think a lot of people outwards looking in go, creating the brand's fun, but creating a product that is truly differentiated in the marketplace. You guys talk about disrupting a category or reimagining a category. That's not easy and that's quite intimidating. Like, how did you go about finding to work on the formulation? And, did you look outside of Australia? Like, did you have industry contacts? What did that look like? What did that process look like? How do you even test that stuff? Like, there's a whole, kind of a quite an intimidating process.
Well, and I guess where we started is very different to where we are now. We didn't really think. We'd only worked with contract manufacturers in previous roles in product development. So that was kind of our, that's what we knew what to do. We knew who there's only a handful of TGA approved manufacturers in Australia. Yep. And we'd worked with most of the big ones through various jobs. Yes. Sorry. And there were a couple that Mecca had blacklisted, and so we were like, "This is a good place for us to start." We know there's such a clear line in the sand here. There's going to be no questions. Oh, have they taken this formula, or they, because we had a lot of intel working at a retailer, so we very, carefully and I guess strategically chose who we were going to work with, and it was where there was no overlap. Which is hard in an Australian beauty landscape. There's not as I said, there's not a huge amount of manufacturers, and there's even less who are approved to make sunscreen. So we worked with them, and then there was a younger female chemist in this manufacturer, and we kind of felt she got the vision, and she was kind of fresh out of uni at the time. Yeah, was probably doing some of the more innovative stuff that we'd seen. And we kind of developed a good relationship with this manufacturer, and we were able to kind of work on their formulations with them and with her. And it wasn't just, as Bec mentioned before, this very functional sunscreen. Well, it's passed SPF 50 plus, it's passed UVA testing, it's passed water resistance. And even though it is a whitening, greasy mess on your face, it ticks the boxes. So what else do you want? It wasn't those kinds of conversations we were having. It was more about, what skincare active can we add here? Let's make this lighter. Let's give this a glow. And she kind of really got it. So that was, the first person that we worked with.
I would say too, a key, because we do get asked this question a bit, like, where do you start? How do you take those first steps? I think and also a really important first step that we don't even think about mentioning because it was so obvious to us is know what good looks like. And whilst we didn't see what good looked like in our space, but we knew what a beautiful moisturizer looked like, and we knew what a great primer looked like, and we knew what a glow serum looked like. And it was combining those attributes with a sun protection element that we were really looking for. But I guess we were the ultimate consumers. Like, we knew what we would put on our faces and what we wouldn't if it was a greasy white mess. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. You might feel like, oh, I'm getting into this just because I love the industry, but that's actually really important. And I think honing that knowledge of what good looks like is a really critical part, so that then you are going to have to come to a point, and we do now, like we have to approve formulations on the fly. You've got 5 minutes because it's got to go into production. And if you didn't know what good looks like, you'd be constantly second guessing yourself. You wouldn't be able to make decisions. You wouldn't be able to move forward. So I do think really honing that base level of understanding was really an unspoken important part of that product development process.
I admire your courage because you've got this kind of runway where you've got to launch this thing, but you've got to make the product right too. And you've got MOQs. Can we talk through those logistics, if that's okay? Like, what was the MOQ? What was the starting capital? What did that look like? You've got to work on the website. You've got to look at the brand. I'm looking at the product now. Did it look like this?
No. So yeah, and that was why I think we needed to spend that time up front on really thinking through all of those elements. And then, it was with our families that we had to make that leap. You don't just jump in isolation into something as crazy as starting a business. I still have a husband. He had to be really supportive of, one income, this is really risky. This is probably going to take a lot of my heart and soul, which it does now. And he was really supportive of that. I mean, you met Dion partway through the process, so he had to kind of get on board pretty quickly. But yeah, they were really supportive. And in terms of MOQs, I guess a story about MOQs, they feel quite insurmountable when you first investigate launching a brand. And I guess because we'd worked with product development before, we were less intimidated, but there was still a point when we launched and we had 5 products.
Wow, 5 products.
An MOQ, we have 5? Yeah, 5.
5 products, okay, not just one.
And typical MOQs in a regulated product like sunscreen are 10,000 units per SKU.
Wow.
So we negotiated a little bit. I think we had 40,000 units in total for our first buy. And that was with no customer, no website. We had a warehouse and we were determined to kind of set things up. We had no distribution. And we had a coffee with someone else who, like a founder, like a beautiful founder that was giving us some time. When we shared with her that we were buying 40,000 units of stock, she nearly fell off a chair. And up until that point, I don't think we'd really thought through the physical space of what 40,000 units would look like. And this is someone who was successful in our eyes and had done a really good job, and she was really horrified. And then I think we thought, oh shit, yeah, actually it is a lot. And maybe and I think only at that point, then you start to think, what if we never move it? And sunscreen has an expiry date. If you don't sell it within 2 or 3 years, you have to throw it out. Yeah. So there was a ticking time bomb of how long that stock could be around. And so I think, there's a little bit of naivety as you go through the process, but there's moments like that one where you try and imagine what that physically looks like. It wouldn't have fit in either of our living rooms combined.
And you were very certain. Like, one of the things we budgeted for when we were doing our cash flow and, how much money we'd need, which you've asked about, one of the things Bec was very clear on was I'm not having this in our houses. It's where we have to get a proper pick and pack warehouse, a 3PL. So that was one of the, and it was set the tone for a lot of structure Bec's embedded in the business. But from a very early stage, there was definitely, it was never there. And I was probably I don't care. I'll put it in my spare room. But
well, that's how people usually do it, right?
Exactly. I don't, as Bec said, we didn't know on 40,000 units. And I think we'd also seen, we'd been in a retailer that was doing phenomenally well. So I think we were kind of like, 10,000 units of something walking out the door didn't feel like a big deal to us, but they also at that point would have had 60 or 80, 60 retail doors for that stock, plus a booming online business. So I think we probably were a bit naive in terms of that, but it didn't feel scary to either of us. And I think we'd been used to working with larger volumes, but I guess there probably were a few moments where we were kind of like,
well, and then
what are we going to do?
How did that event, what happened to that 40,000 units of stock? We ended up placing our first replenishment order within 6 months of launching. Wow. So I think that's when we thought, okay, we don't need to worry about moving those 40,000 units of stock. We now need to worry about affording the second buy and keeping this business going, which is, a different problem. So in terms of cash, I think, 40,000 units, you can do the math, like say it's $5 a unit, $5 to $10 a unit. We knew we were in for a couple of $100,000 each. And I think that was I think it was great. We didn't have to put in a cent after that point, really.
No.
That funded our first buy. I was really adamant we need to buy 2 rounds of stock. And if we can afford to buy 2 rounds of stock as well as a website, trademarks, whatever else we needed, that would be enough to get us going. And it actually was. So I didn't want us to be in a position where all we had was enough to buy the first round and then we were like, oh, what do we do now? So if we had 2 rounds, then I knew that the cash flow would be fine to sustain us. And I'd say we launched first with an online, our own website and ultraviolet.com.au. And with that website, what it means is that we were getting cash instantly and we had a higher margin. So from a profitability point of view, online, and this is 2019, things are different now, we could really get some scale quickly, and that funding came back into the business to help fund those subsequent rounds of stock. And it was really important to have that instant cash flow. I think sometimes you get enamored with a retailer and you can't appreciate the margin that they're going to take and the impact that that's going to have to the profitability. That is your fuel. And I think being really protective of a good margin product, having a strong e-com business, and we've always had a metric to keep e-com at about 25% of our total sales. And obviously in year 1, it was 90%. That's come down over time, but it still is a really healthy chunk of our overall total mix of business. And it really does fuel the cash of the business, which is important.
Yeah, got you. So you got to tell me about launch plan, guys. I've got some research that you launched. Mamma Mia helped you in a big way. But talk me about the launch plan, because a lot of people, that's a big sticking point, right? Like this is a big risk, right? Yeah. Like, I didn't take on that risk when I started Foundr. It cost me about $3,000 to start. And I was doing it while I was working on my job on the side. I was earning $50,000 a year in IT support. So I admire your guys' courage.
Well, the launch plan was, we had, we've both been in beauty for a long time. I've been in beauty. Both my parents are creative. So I've kind of grown up surrounded by editors and, and so we had some good relationships with some, really top level beauty editors, and one of whom was writing a story in Stella magazine, which is a weekend magazine. It has they're the kind of publications you really want to be in because of the eyeballs. They're going to, 2 million people versus, 40,000. And she said, look, I can write something about you. I've only got space on this day. It was like early December. Yeah. And we weren't ready to launch. We had product. We didn't have product. We didn't have we probably had a bare bones of a website. And so we thought, we've just got to make this happen, go with this website, go get something up, don't care what it is. So we kind of begged, borrowed.
So that it was available when the article
came out. Yeah. So we kind of begged, borrowed, stole. We told our manufacturer.
We didn't steal.
We didn't steal. No, we didn't steal.
We did beg and borrow.
Yeah. We did beg and borrow. And we said to our manufacturer, look, we need press samples. Can you just give us a run of 100? Can you just don't care if they're, if they're, not in the big tanks, they can be in the little tanks. That's fine. Just we need 100 units to put on a website. And we created these little packs. and kind of sold them at a value, I guess, because the brand hadn't officially launched. And it was like a lip gloss. I think it was just a lip gloss and one product, one of the facial SKUs, and you could buy one of those. And it was that was what we allocated as our press stock. So we actually weren't really allowed to sell it, but whatever. It was enough years ago that no one's going to be coming after us. We weren't allowed to, even though it ticked all the boxes, it had all been tested. It was the same product that was going into the final launch stuff. So it was all very safe, I will say that. But we weren't theoretically allowed to sell it. So we just made these little packs. We had these little makeup bags and we put them on a bare bones, like landing page basically. And then this article came out 2 months before we actually launched the brand, and we sold through them in, I don't know, a couple of days. And so that kind of stuff. And then from there we built a wait list. So we started building a wait list. I don't know. And at that point as well, we started building an Instagram. And I think we had an Instagram as well. I think that was kind of around that time we turned it on. And I think by the time we launched the brand, we probably had maybe 1,000 people on a wait list and 1,000 people on Instagram, which felt like a lot, or maybe a bit more. And then from there, it was really just seeding. Like we were doing something, you know, as we said before, quite disruptive. The packaging looked like skincare product. It was like serum bottles, you know, airless pump tubes. It wasn't just like a squeezy tube or a big pump pack sunscreen. So the packaging looked different. The packaging was vibrant. The colors were, you know, neon and blue. And we kind of knew that at the time in 2018, 2019, it was that shelfie kind of Instagram time. And we knew it would stand out on shelfies and pictures of, you know, flat lays on Instagram and whatever else was happening on the platform at that time. And sent it to all of our beauty editor friends, sent it to any kind of influencers we knew or had any sort of relationship with. And that was kind of the launch plan. It wasn't, there was no kind of, it was very traditional press, gifting, influencer, but not paid, no paid influencer. It was all very organic. And it was all very local Australia. So, and Mamma Mia did write a fantastic article calling us, you know, a future cult brand. And Lee Campbell, who is a friend of the brand, wrote this amazing article. And they also had a Mamma Mia You Beauty Facebook group. And it was there was a lot of activity going on in that Facebook group. It was when beauty Facebook groups were like at their prime. So they might have only had 10,000 people in there, but they were very active and commented and wrote and, you know, gave feedback. And so people were talking about it in this Facebook group as well. And so it kind of, at that point, that was it. That was the start. Lee wrote about it on the day we launched. We were getting sales from people we knew, but then, you know, after an hour, we didn't know the people anymore. And, you know, it was very exciting. And yeah, I think it was just a great start and gave us a lot of confidence. And then we've kind of, obviously invested a lot more. You know, we kind of turned on performance marketing and worked with an agency on, you know, Mecca and Google and all those, but it was so bare bones. Like it was, and we didn't really have that much money. So it was very, very, like, I think we probably spent $1,000. You know,
we used those 40,000 units though. We were giving away product.
Yes. We gave away a lot of product, which, you know,
to see.
You hear a lot.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, when you've got good product, you can rely on that as a really strong kind of marketing tactic. And we kind of, I guess at that point, we had some confidence that we had good product because we had good feedback.
Yeah. So look, it's interesting. There's a common thread I find when I speak to e-commerce founders and brand builders is the product, right? The product first and foremost. If you get that right, it flies, right? And it's not a Facebook hack. It's not an Instagram hack. It's not one big influencer that's going to blow you up. The product just moves. And, you know, you talk about performance marketing. People have challenges with performance marketing. We all do, right? But all it does is amplify, right? And so it's, from what I'm hearing, you know, there's no crazy launch tactics. You use traditional media. You've got some great contacts, right? But what really worked was spending that 3 years getting the product right.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yes.
So you sharpen the axe.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it speaks to, we started from a place where we had inherent respect for the consumer, so much so that we spent those 2.5 years developing product, mostly for her. Mostly it's a female audience, but really, like, they're not just the respect for them in the product development process, but we were not out buying followers. We were not out shoving a label on something so that we could quickly meet a deadline. Like, there was genuine, I think we had to craft this.
The packaging was expensive. Like, we went to a Korean manufacturer. So we weren't taking shortcuts with cheap packaging that was going to fall apart. And
I think you can tell of those type of foundations. You make some big important decisions up front and you build from there. So, and I think the consumer could tell, there was care and thoughtfulness put into that product. I know a lot of people would say that, but we've seen other, copycats where it's not the case. And I think it's having that inherent respect for the consumer that is really important.
Yeah. So talk to me about the third person branding. When did that start?
We've kind of touched on this, but we came into the category where it was very seasonal. It was very cancer focused, especially in Australia, right? We have the highest rates of skin cancer in the world. Our UV index is phenomenally high. And it was very, very, the messaging was very cancer. And we knew that what resonated with us as consumers and as women was, it's not no 20, 30-year-old thinks they're going to get cancer. No one, you don't think about that stuff, right? Unless you've got a history of it in your family, in which case you're more aware. But what impacted us was that the sun and UV rays are the number one cause of premature aging. 80% of premature aging is caused by UV rays. So that was something that we were kind of like, no one's really talking about this, and therefore it needs to be worn every day. No one's talking about this. Everyone's kind of pushing cancer, pushing summer, pushing beach, vacay, whatever it is. And we knew we needed to talk to the customer in a way that made sense to them and their lifestyle. And a way to do this was through this concept of Vi, which, Violet. The brand's Ultra Violette. It's the Violet spelt like a female name. It was actually for a trademark. It wasn't super intentional or strategic on our side. We couldn't trademark Ultra Violet without the extra TE. So we were like, let's create this character around Vi and Violet. And she's become something we use in education. And it's just another way of talking about the brand that's not just us as founders, because, we're not celebrities. We're not Selena Gomez. We're not,
I've got a funny Vi story, actually. I think we're still realizing what power there can be in this, character. We thought at the time, this could be a bit of fun, and one of our brand values is to really find the fun in everything that we do. So something that's not fun is writing an IM when you're going for investment. So when you're going to the market to seek an investor, which we were doing this time, just over 12 months ago, and an IM, if ever you've seen one, is the most boring document you've ever laid eyes on. And I think, we were really struggling with this, this document doesn't feel like us. How does our brand essence come through here? And I remember sending Ava an email about, okay, we need to jazz up our bio pages, because there's, we need to talk about the team. There's Ava, myself. We were also featuring our CFO, Emma. And I'm like, do we say like what fun things we like to do on the weekend? How do we make this a little bit more fun? And Ava was like, oh God, that's even boring. I think we need to add Vi into the leadership team. We're like, but Vi doesn't exist. So we ended up on something as serious as an IM, putting on our bio page the two founders, our CFO, and Vi, our chief skinscreen officer. And then we were like, well, we need to have a bit more fun with this. So then Vi started to pop up on various pages and making rude or like inappropriate comments. So like and we ended up having such a laugh with it. Our bankers were absolute sports, because they'd obviously never seen a fictional character appear on these documents, but they let us go with it. And it really did bring out a smile in people that read it. And it really, we had responses back where people had done pictures of the product in situ and tried to kind of have a bit of fun back with it. So I think we're still realizing what power Vi can add. We would never have thought she would have been a character in an IM, but she can definitely, she's starting to appear at a time that's appropriate, but I guess it's having that brand confidence. And also we now have a global audience. We have lots of things to tell that global audience, and not everyone's as educated as Australians are because of, Slip, Slop, Slap has a lot of good things to answer for in building a great awareness of sun protection in Australia. A lot of countries still don't have that, or they have a tanning culture or, tanning beds, solariums. So bringing out Vi as our lead communication tool in those markets sometimes isn't appropriate. But in a market like Australia, where we've got a lot of the basics down pat already, we can start to have a bit more fun. And I think it's really great when you're ideating a brand. So I guess a lot of founders just focus on the logo. What's the logo? We have a logo, we have a monogram, which is our U and our V. We have Vi, we have our color system, we have our tone of voice. I think you need to have a lot of elements to bring out a multi-dimensional brand, and Vi is just one of them that we like to have a bit of fun with.
Yeah, I'd love to explore the branding piece more, like the colors. Really cool. Like it's traditionally a boring product. You guys have really taken it to a whole nother level, and it looks amazing. Like I said, my offline, my partner, she was like, do you have any samples? Like, I'm really excited. It's going to earn me brownie points, so thank you for bringing that in. But yeah, how did you guys work that out? What advice would you have to founders from a branding perspective around colors, around packaging, around tone of voice, around, the third person branding? That's what Frank did really well as well,
yes.
right? Talk me through that.
Well, we worked, first of all, I don't suggest founders get onto Canva and try and do it themselves.
No?
It's an art.
Yeah, I agree.
And you need to find someone that has done it before and understands, if you're creating a physical product, you need to work with someone who understands, and depending on where you want this product to live, on a shelf, online, wherever, there are certain considerations, like you need a product lockup, so you need someone to think through all of those things. And a product lockup is, the product name, its function, where the logo sits, where the monogram, if you've got one, sits, if there's descriptive copy, and that needs to then be consistent for all of your products. But it is, so first of all, find someone who knows what they're doing. And if it's a physical product, understands finished art, because that's, again, printing something on paper is very different to printing something on a 3D, actual tangible product. So find someone who knows what they're doing, and someone that ideally gets you as a founder. So we worked with someone we'd worked with before, understood us. There are a few things I was very clear about in my head that I kind of wanted to get through. And, one of these things was the use of color. And obviously Bec and I were aligned on that. And we wanted to kind of nod to, if you look at a lot of sunscreen brands, it's blue and yellow. Yellow for sun, blue for sea.
Pretty basic.
Yeah. And we wanted to, I guess, nod to that. We're still a sunscreen product at the end of the day. We can't completely abandon the roots of the category. And so we kind of, initially was like, do we do navy? And then I kind of was looking, and there was this Eve Klein blue, which is it's a very vibrant blue. It's also called margarelle blue. I can't even, it's so pigmented, and it's kind of, I don't even know how to describe, just Google it if you, Eve, spelled like Yves Saint Laurent. And that is a very hard color. In retrospect, it is a very hard color to print. You do get a lot of packaging suppliers that go either like the royal blue side or kind of a bit too, I don't know, just, navy even. So anyway, it was a tricky color to choose, but it did allow us to stand out. And then the highlight colors that you see, the neons, pastel neons, are kind of a bit of a nod to that, the zincs that we, put on our faces at the beach. So there are some kind of really subtle nods to the heritage of the category and to like what we were actually trying to create. But it first and foremost for us needed to feel elevated and like skincare, not like sun care. colors have a specific use. Like there might be one color that we use to denote the hydrating products. So there's like a hierarchy in terms of and a clear navigational kind of system for these colors as well. They're not just randomly chucked on products. So this is what I mean when it might just seem like, oh, they've used pretty colors that stand out. And at the time, everything in the market was black and white. You know, Byredo was very big in beauty. Or Millennial Pink, Glossier had launched in 2014. That was obviously, you know, a major beauty brand. And so a lot of brands were copying that, and we just wanted to be so different to that. But so that was a really, it didn't actually take that long because, as I said, working with someone who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and you just work with like a freelancer, not an agency.
Yes, exactly. Unless you've raised cash already, don't work with an agency. It'll set you back, you know, 200 grand, 150 to 200 grand. Find a designer, ask around, someone who's worked on branding and understands how things need to kind of look in situ.
And I think with those building blocks, I look back at that process and it was surprisingly short.
It was.
I was really guarding myself for, like, when this is, you know, we'd both done branding and artwork and all kinds of things before. And you think when you get the chance to do that for your own brand, I am going to be so precious about that thing. I'm going to make sure it's absolutely perfect. And I think it was really surprising that having that, you know, that everything's got to be absolutely right doesn't have to take you 3 years if you nail it straight away with good foundations.
That took 3 rounds.
Yeah,
it was 3 rounds. The first round was a bit more purple. Maybe the lockup wasn't when we talk about a lock, I can show you what I mean. But, you know, it's like the logo's at the front, then it's this copy, then it's the monogram, then it's that copy. And then, and there's also with sunscreen, there's regulatory stuff you need to factor in. So it's not just like a moisturizer that you can say whatever you want on the packaging. You can't make claims. You can't say a lot of things that you might like to from, you know, as a marketer and as brand builders, you might want to make all these like amazing claims, which are actually true, but you can't say those things because it's regulated like a drug.
And you have to say boring things as well, like, is this a cream or a lotion? Like, that doesn't, you know, float anyone's boat, but you have to say it. And you can't say any of that bigger or smaller than certain font styles. So we were also quite hamstrung, but even with that, it was 3 rounds and we were.
Hey guys, I really hope you're feeling inspired from today's interview. Now, the truth is, all successful e-commerce founders started from zero, with a spark of an idea and a whole lot of determination. But let's be real, building or growing an e-commerce business is no walk in the park. And that's where Foundr Plus comes in, which I'm really excited to share with you. It's a culmination of a decade worth of work at Foundr. So if you're feeling stuck in your e-commerce business, you're lacking confidence to move forward, or you're worried about making costly mistakes or not knowing how to grow your business, Foundr Plus is here to support you on your journey. You get access to a customized learning pathway with proven frameworks from successful e-commerce founders for fast results, incredible programs, a supportive community, weekly live mentorship, exclusive savings on startup tools, and 24/7 real human support. Try Foundr Plus today for just $1 for 7 days so you can accelerate your business goals. Visit foundr.com/start $trial or click the link in the description to claim your trial. All right, now let's jump back in the show. Yeah, that's interesting. And it brings me back to kind of my own experience when it comes to building brands. I think if you find a really good designer, or a really good freelancer or an agency, and they just get it, it doesn't take that long. It's not like the first draft should be like 80%, 70% at worst from my experience.
Yeah.
And
that's
then
exactly right.
you can get it done really fast.
Yeah.
I found that as well.
But the brief's got to be clear.
Yes.
And they've got to get the vision.
Yeah. But if you work with someone that's talented, you can take it pretty far pretty quickly.
The other thing I'd say is there's 2 of us. There's 2 founders. We had got to be on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, like, Ava is definitely more, you still are, you're managing the design and the brand side of the business. So your opinion counted for maybe 51% and I was 49. But I think also being clear about that, how are we going to make this decision? And you know, we both better really like it. So I think even more testament that it only took 3 rounds.
I don't even remember having any conversations with you about the direction.
You read my mind.
You must have liked the first round enough where you were like, oh, okay, I'm not going to kick off.
But you'd hinted, like we talked about the concepts that we wanted to see in it, and I was on board with that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have agreed if I didn't like it.
No, of course, you're not going to put something into the world that you don't think is good.
No, you guys are like, one thing I've really taken away from this conversation is you guys really went for it. You guys didn't just dip your toe in the water.
That's how we roll, Nathan.
Yeah, you guys really went for it.
We still are really
going
for it.
I love that. I love that. That's business,
Yeah.
right? That's entrepreneurship, right? You know, like
that's right.
I remember a mentor once said to me, you know what, Nathan, if someone's not coming close to like, you know, it's not working out or losing it all, they're probably not pushing hard enough.
Yeah.
Right?
I also think too, the add to that is you don't just push hard enough once at the start. You have to do it multiple
every day.
Our first retailer, is that
never
the right
enough.
retailer? Is that where we should be going? Our first international expansion, is that right? Is that where should we go? We're doing that. We're still doing that now.
Yeah. And you don't get every decision right. Like our first international market probably shouldn't have been what our first international market was, but we learned.
Yeah.
And it was a way for us to say we're global.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and you just can't necessarily overthink every single decision. You just kind of have to go with it and realize that there are some fuck ups you can fix later.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I'd say the one thing as a founder is you have to be excellent at making decisions and know which decisions are the ones that need more diligence, more thought, more time, and which ones you just have to make because you're slowing things down. And also being, which lane am I in to make decisions without having to work with Ava, and which ones do we both have to come together on? I think the ability to make good decisions and good quality decisions at the right pace is critical.
And that's a learned skill.
Sure is.
You don't have that.
And a practiced skill.
It is.
Yeah, 100%. So I have to ask you guys more about some product stuff around finding a winning product and knowing you're onto something. What advice would you give to founders there, like that are looking to start a physical product, maybe not in the beauty space or in the beauty space? Like, what, from your experience, like you guys obviously know product development really well, like what would you say to founders?
I think a bit what I said before about knowing what good looks like, I think you also have to know the competitive landscape. So for us, probably the worst $1,000 we've ever spent, but was actually valuable, was buying a report on the sunscreen industry in Australia. Because at the time, all that told us is what was selling in grocery and pharmacy. So there was some hints there in terms of what not to do, but that was our competition at the time. It was mass market. So we still had to be aware of that, and we still had to understand that people, what were consumers previously buying that we wanted them to trade up to or buy into. So I think you really have to know what is that consumer, how are they going to put that money on the counter or online, and what are they actually going to get, and what does that mean compared to what they could otherwise spend that cash on. I think having a really good hard look at yourself and saying, if you're not the consumer, getting someone who really is, if I know a lot of people working on, Gen Z brands, because that's a really growing space. Like, don't rely on your own instinct. Get some kids around, sit in front of them and ask them, would you put this in your pocket of your school dress and bring it out proud, in a way that, you're really happy to share with your friends and, and online, your online community. So I think if you inherently get that, you will make better choices on when you can see a product that you're ready to approve. We're going through at the moment really evaluating our range for a new market, and we are absolutely immersing ourselves in that new market. Even though I feel like we think we know it, we are going so deep in terms of what are primers in that market saying on their website about priming claims. If we want to say we've got priming benefits, how are we stacking up against the market-leading primer? As an example, have we touched and felt that product? And do we know what that looks like and feels like on the skin, such that we are confident of making a claim with our product? So I think it's do the work. Know what the competitive landscape is, and be really honest with, would someone put money on the table for this product that you're presenting?
Yeah, I'd also add to that, know what problem you're solving. Don't just put shit into market because you want to make some money. that we were solving a very specific problem, multiple problems with when we launched Ultra Violette, but that you're solving a problem for every, product, idea, agency, whatever it is, for everything you put into the market, you're effectively solving a problem. So just be very clear about what that problem is and how you plan to solve that. And again, look at the competitive landscape. If there's 10 other brands solving the exact same problem as you, it's pretty telling.
It's
Maybe
tough.
you don't need to go there. Maybe the world doesn't need this brand. Think of another idea,
What other things from a beauty brand perspective do founders or perhaps aspiring beauty brand founders need to think about? Chemist, what are some other key things as well that people don't know?
I mean, I'll borrow from Bec's book is, check your trademarks. There's a lot of structure, and if you're a creative, like I would consider myself more of a commercial creative, not like a designer or anything, but you don't necessarily think about these things. And it's like things like trademarks. Check, if you've got a name for a company that you want to, set up, check that there's not another company out there. Like, do a global check. If you plan to be global, these are the things that seem really, well, to me, they would have felt small and annoying to have to spend money on, because I'd rather put money into an amazing design agency or whatever, or a photo shoot. But these are the things that are going to trip you up when you kind of get down the line. So trademarks, I feel like I'm stealing your thunder. Focus on cash flow. Focus on cash flow. Because again, that's, as Bec said, that's your fuel. And again, will trip you up if you don't get that right. You can't, for the best product in the world or the best idea in the world, if you have someone, if you have a pet brand knocking on your door because you've stolen their name, and they're going to force you to repackage everything, that's an expensive kind of mistake you don't want to have to make in the first 6 months of starting a business.
You guys talking from experience?
No, thankfully. No, we're not. But I think too, another thing that's starting a beauty brand, beauty is so global, probably more global than any other industry. Social media is global. People share ideas, share trends. I think from the outset, having a point of view of, is your brand going to be a domestic, a thriving domestic brand? Or do you want to take this brand global? And there's several reasons as to why you do both, and they're both, equally legitimate. But have starting from a point of view of being global, which our brand did. We knew that this was solving a global problem, not just an Australian problem. We knew if we wanted to play at the more premium end of the market, then to get scale, we had to be global, because Australia is such a small market by comparison. So having that global mindset from the outset was really important, and that really drove some key decisions for us. So to give you an example of one of those really tough decisions, when it came down to choosing a beauty retailer in Australia, we chose Sephora because they're global, and they not only are they in lots of countries, but they have a global function that really does look at emerging brands and helps them grow in international markets much quicker than they otherwise would. And because we had said from the outset, this is a global problem that we're solving, this is a global brand, we chose Sephora, and we haven't looked back. They've been such an incredible partner to us. In Australia, we've got a phenomenal relationship. We're in the top 2 brands in the skincare category. They give us more space than we would if we were in other retailers, and we now get to point to that internationally in the Sephora network and say, look at what we can do in Australia. We can do that in your market too. And Sephora are winning internationally in this space. So I think having that in mind from the outset meant we made very different decisions early on than you might expect, and it's definitely playing out. And equally, if we had have decided we wanted a nice little domestic business, we would have a lot more time on our hands right now. We would not be doing crazy hours, and our business was profitable from year one. So it definitely, whilst that could have been a legitimate option, I do think because of the nature of the industry that we chose, which is beauty, competition emerges so quickly that it would have potentially meant a shorter life for the brand because, it's easy to be a competitor. The TGA does make it more difficult for other brands that don't meet TGA requirements to enter. So there's a little bit of a barrier to entry. But, competition comes from all angles. So we potentially, whilst we could have had a nice, quiet, profitable life for a few years, that might have also been an earlier end to the brand. So I do think making that distinction from the outset really does change your competitive landscape, how you will position the brand, and some really fundamental choices that you make early on.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. Like when I started Foundr, for whatever reason, I always wanted to appeal to the American market. Like it's such a big market compared to Australia. Australia is very small when you think of it, right?
But it's nice. It's a nice market.
It's nice. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Like, we, that's our second biggest market. But like America is massive, right? It's such a big opportunity from a commercial perspective.
Absolutely.
Like, when I started Foundr, the domain name was foundermag.com, but never I got the .au, but like I always knew like you want to think how can you sell to the world? Like that's the idea.
Well, and interesting now where we are looking at America as a market, and we're coming up against American brands that if you start in a market the size of America, you've got a massive commercial opportunity on your doorstep. And so it's interesting when we come up against American heritage brands, they had a struggle to then adapt to other markets. Whereas I guess we're starting from a smaller market, we have to be global. So it really, I think, we've got some really good muscle strength in terms of how do we adjust our tagline, how do we talk in non-English speaking markets that aren't, Australia first. So we've had to be global in our mindset from the get-go. And I think when we're up against those brands that don't have to think like that because you're born in America, it's a really different experience. So I just think of it where you try and project where you want to be and start with that in mind.
Couple last questions around this. Pros and cons of owning your own formula.
Do you want to do the cons or you do the pros?
You do the cons. I feel like
I'll do the cons.
Look,
the pros.
Look, we had this conversation. We launched the brand, and we were able to launch the brand in 2.5 years, which we've kind of talked about. Feels like a long time in startup world when things can happen faster, but not for sunscreens. If we'd wanted to own our own formulations at that point, we would have been looking at, we probably only would have launched 2 or 3 years ago because it takes so long. It can take so long. And then there's a whole other learning. And this is not something we'd ever done before. So this was a real learning for us is you have to scale up. To manufacturing. So, sorry, I'm supposed to be talking about the pros. Okay. The pros are, the pros. When you go to sell your business, you've got that IP.
Yep.
You've got that IP. You're not reliant on a manufacturer, which, if they go out of business, then what? I mean, you could probably try and buy that formula but then you have to start the whole, tech transfer process, which, as I started to say before, which Bec can get into, is really complicated, onerous. There's so much regulatory. So, I mean, owning your own formulations, that is a big pro, owning that IP. And it's worth something when you have good formulations. It's really worth something. And you could take that to any manufacturer in the world. It's yours. You can tinker with it. You can make changes down the line. If you've launched a product and after 9 months or 6 months you're getting feedback from a customer, you can react to those changes a bit faster than you could if it was an owned formulation. So you can be a bit more responsive, a bit more agile in that space. It also gives you a level of innovation that you can't get from a manufacturer. We talked about this at the beginning, but they're making, in a lot of cases, lowest common denominator formulations because their main clients are Coles and Woolies, and that's where they're doing the most volume. So there's not a lot of manufacturers anywhere who are willing to invest in the UV filters and the innovation that we are wanting to put into our brand. And so these filters can be 10 times more expensive than your kind of garden variety chemical filters. So you kind of can play with a better quality of ingredient. You can kind of dictate the nitty gritty of where an ingredient comes from. It could be, I like this manufacturer for mica, which is basically like what makes things sparkle in a formulation, and you know for sure that is a sustainable mica. It's being farmed in a way that is not detrimental to the community around them. You know, you're working, as I said, with the best UV filters, the best skincare actives, and you have a level of innovation that is, quite frankly, hard for copycats to keep up with. On the flip side, it takes a lot longer.
So the cons,
they're the two pros. They're pretty big. They are pretty big pros,
and they're worth it.
And you also go in one more pro is that you know, if you're trying to say, look, okay, I want to make a liquid mineral product, sunscreen. You have to go to all of the if you weren't to own your own formulation and start briefing in a chemist, you're going to all the manufacturers and you're saying, do you guys have a mineral liquid? And they're saying yes or no. And most of the time, if you're trying to do something that's interesting, the answer is no. Or they've got a thicker mineral and they can try and add something in it to make it thinner. But that's not necessarily going to give you what you want. So you're kind of compromising in a lot of ways, just working with contract manufacturers. Whereas, you know, with a chemist, you could say, this is what I want to do. It's this crazy pie in the sky idea, and it needs to look like this and feel like that. And you don't have that, you know, capability working with contract manufacturers.
And then the cons, I guess, don't go into this naively thinking it's easy, because it's really hard, and you have got to upskill yourself on manufacturing process, so methods of manufacture, formulation sheets, raw materials, regulatory requirements, testing requirements. It's another great reason why we just focus on sunscreens, because we can go deep. If we had to then do cleansers and masks and electronic equipment, you know, there's no way you can have a good depth of knowledge on all of those different industries and with a small, nimble team. So I think just be prepared to do the work, because you need to understand. You've got a lot more troubleshooting coming your way. And if you don't actually understand what the process is and what all of the ingredients do and why they're there, you are not going to make good decisions, and you can end up with an absolute hot mess at the end of it. So it is definitely more challenging. There are so many more risks along the way in terms of testing protocols. Things can fall over at the last minute, as they have done for us, which is an absolute devastation when you've got a launch planned and something doesn't go to plan. So it's definitely a harder route to market, but but if it's harder for you, it's harder for everybody else. And that is, you know, a barrier to entry. And as Ava said, that flexibility, not just to make changes, but to enter new markets. So, you know, we currently are in 28 markets. In some formulations, we have 3 different versions of, because we don't want to have lowest common denominator formulations. We want to have highest common denominator formulations. So if Canada requires a certain change in ingredients, we can absolutely do that on the fly. So I think harder to get going, a lot more work up front to make sure you understand. But once you're going, there actually is a real benefit to scaling if you've got those own formulations.
Yeah, so it's part of your moat.
And cost is gone.
Oh yeah, sorry, cost, sleepless nights, stress, all of that stuff. I just, brushed over that, but it's really fucking hard.
Yeah, and really fucking expensive. And we have a team of 4 in-house plus Bec and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That work just on product and regulatory.
Yeah. So painful but worth it.
Mm-hmm. I think
in
so.
The long run.
Ask us, Nathan, in a couple of years' time. But okay. I think so.
All right, look, I could talk to you guys all day. We've got, Foundr Plus, our members. We asked if they had any questions for you guys. We've actually got so many. I can't go through them all. But I'll pick a couple.
Okay.
Realistically, what do you need to do in order to pitch a large group like a Mecca or Sephora? Like, what do you need? How many products? Do you need to have a certain amount of revenue? How important is community versus actual revenue? It's such a crowded space.
That's a great question.
What boxes should you tick off before you're even ready to pitch?
Do you want to start?
Okay. I get asked this question a lot from friends that are kind of getting into the business. I think if you've got a crystal clear idea and a really clear reason for being, I don't think you need to have a product in market even. I think you need to have samples that you can show those merchants, and you need to trust that they are good at their job, and like 99% of them are, where they can see a product and see the benefit of it in their assortment. So I think the biggest thing I'd say is think like that retailer. If you're trying to get into a mass channel retailer, go and shop that channel, like look at their products, look at their staff, look at the selling environment. Like
Look at the price points.
Online versus bricks and mortar. If it's a prestige group like a Sephora, that's probably what I guess we can mostly speak to. You need to have a clear view of your price positioning in that market compared to that competition. You need to have a formulation. You need to have a vision for what that's going to do for them. So you might be coming at it. We're coming at this saying we're going to sell Skinscreen. We're going to change the landscape in sun. Sephora wants to know, does that add to my basket size? Is it going to cannibalize other categories I currently have in market?
Or other brands.
Am I just going to switch from a higher priced item to a lower priced item? That's not good for them. So you need to think like that retailer and make sure you're giving them something that's accretive to what they already have. How are you going to add value by being on their shelf? And if you've answered those questions, you've got a beautiful looking brand that you think is going to stand out in their stores. Yeah. You've got a product sample, a price point, and you can afford the margin. That's the other thing. Make sure you can afford a good anywhere between 50 and
80. I think we've heard
80.
80%.
We would
not
never
in our
pay that,
retailer.
but
Not in our retailer.
But
yes.
some do require
Savages.
that. And obviously distributors, if you use a distributor as well.
Yeah.
Which we don't do very often. So I think if you can afford it, that's really the last thing people get carried away with before they don't answer that question.
And the flip side to that, if you're talking to a mass retailer, know their discounting cadence.
Oh God,
if you assume the margin might be, I don't know, we've never sold in grocer, but the margin will be smaller, but you'll be expected to fund that 50% or 40% discount that happens. You might see in hair, it happens 4 times a year or whatever it is if you're a shampoo brand. So factor that discounting cadence into your.
Those rebates can be a real killer.
Yeah. And then I think there was a comment about community versus revenue. I don't think retailers necessarily care about revenue. I think they'd care more about community. So if you're a brand that's and you're selling basic cleansers and moisturizers at a more premium price point because you've got some sort of innovation in there, but you've got a following of 100,000 on TikTok, and most of that 100,000 is 18 to 21-year-olds, which is a market that everyone wants in beauty at the moment. And you can say, I'm going to bring these 18 to 21-year-olds into the store. That's very valuable. And that's, as Bec said, thinking like the retailer. And I think, buzz and having a seemingly hot brand is also kind of helpful. It'll help you get your foot in the door. If they look behind the curtain and see you're a hot mess, they'll be able to suss that out quite quickly. They'll want to know that, you're able to supply. If they put in an order of 2,000 units and that sells out in a week, they're going to want to know that you'll have more stock in the warehouse to fulfill them. So you kind of do have to prove that you've got your act together from a back end point of view as well for them to take account on you.
And just finally, the game is not to get on the shelf. The game is to get someone to buy you off the shelf. And I think just thinking, it's not just like, yes, I've landed a retailer, but you want to think in 12 months time, you've been a productive brand on their shelves and you've moved through stock. So I think just keeping that end game, that's the end game, not the just getting onto shelf.
Yeah. Okay. Got a couple more that I'd like to just pick through, and then we've got to move to the hot seat round wrap. All right. So testing formulations with real people. How have you guys done it? Would love to know. How much feedback do you get before you run with it?
That's another really good question. We do a lot. Like, we've obviously now got a team of 20 something and with varying in-house. So we often start with that. We start with us. Mm-hmm. And if it gets past us, it then goes to the team. So there's about 20. And then depending on what it is, if it's a tinted product or if it's a product that's focused towards oily or acne prone skin, we'll find customers in our database or Instagram. We'll go to people. We kind of have lots and lots and lots of different lists. So it's like we've got customers who have bought a specific product that might already exist in our range for oil, that's targeted to oily skin. So we might email 100 of these people and say, does anyone identify with, having acne prone skin or having oil flow as a concern? And if they and if so, would you be interested in trialing a new product? Most people love to be involved in kind of the creation of new products. So we do lean on our existing database for specialized products. But, you know, often the number could be, if we tested in the office and it gets a slam dunk, no notes, you know, that's 25 people. Like at that point, we're probably assuming that we're onto something good there. If it's kind of a bit mixed, that's when we go wider. We'll often go to our network of friends. So, you know, I've got a 2-year-old. So when he was a baby, I was in a mother's group and there was, you know, 20 women in that mother's group that were of the demographic that we kind of, you know, target. And so it was like, right, there's 20 women, they've all got different skin types, like who wants to test it? And then they'll get a very structured, it's not just like try this and email us what you think. It's like they'll get a Google sheet that's like very specific questions around that specific product. We also pay, you know, testing groups as well to test products if we need, if it's a specific audience that we're looking for, or, you know, we were looking for a geographical input into a new product. So a specific region that had different climate to Australia. So we went to a group of people in this market. We paid quite a significant amount of money for them to test it. So it does vary. And then, you know, if we're looking, we're always testing on different skin tones as well. So we will go out, whether, you know, we have to hire a model
or a makeup
artist. If we don't have anyone in our immediate network that has that kind of skin color or skin tone, we kind of just it varies, but we make sure we feel like we've done a pretty comprehensive testing program for any new product.
Yeah, awesome. And then last one from our members: how to scale without going broke? Exclamation mark. I thought I'd put that in. Formulation is expensive. Any advice on product development timings in terms of new releases?
Is that 2 questions? Or
yeah, kind of. Formulation, product development timings in terms of new releases.
Okay.
Not going broke.
No.
That's a whole other
Yeah, how to not go broke. I mean, simple answer, how not to go broke is focus on your unit economics. So add everything up, make sure you've factored in freight, all packaging, cost to handle, warehousing, distribution. You know, it sounds easy, but, you know.
And have scenarios for sales if they're like
cash flow forecasting.
Yeah, and retail margin. Don't forget that. So that's that answer. And cash flow projections. Like for the first 2 years, I'd say a P&L's helpful, but a cash flow forecast is 10 times more helpful. And I hadn't never worked on cash flow forecasts before this. So I got someone to show me, a friend who was in finance. We lived and breathed it. So that's absolutely critical. In terms of what's coming, we are really focused on, you know, sun protection and making sure we have a beautiful and elegant product for every single skin type, skin tone, and skin need. So we've got a matrix. We're kind of closing out a few formats that we don't have, package delivery systems that we don't have, textures that we don't have, and we kind of strategically move through those. That map is now global, so we also have to look at what have we got in the Northern Hemisphere that we don't have in the Southern Hemisphere, and working through that. But it's a pretty I think we're still pretty open. That's great. We love spending time in retail. We do a lot of traveling at the moment. We know our way through any kind of beauty retailer you could imagine, and seeing what's happening in skincare, seeing what's happening with active ingredients, looking at what's going on TikTok, or what are the beauty community talking about. I think being really open to that. And again, we've now got the wheels in motion in creating our own formulations. We've got a great network of chemists. It really does make it easy to turn trends around. But there are a couple of interesting textures that we're looking to launch next year in a groundbreaking new formula. So
yeah, okay, all right, guys, let's work towards wrapping up. Hot seat round, rapid fire questions and answers, and I'd like to get an answer from each of you individually, if that's okay. All right. So, can you share what you appreciate about each other as a co-founder?
Oh, that's easy. I'll go first. So Ava is an absolute. I've written this on many a Christmas card to her, but she's kind of got the X factor. So I appreciate that she has a very strong vision for this brand in terms of what it looks like, sounds like, shows up as, and she's got a beautiful way of bringing that out. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. But if I had to pick just one thing, because there's 100, that's what I'd say.
Nice. Yes, there's so many. I kind of start rattling off a laundry list when I think of that. What do I love most about Bec? There are so many things. I mean, I think her sense of fun, that seems really like basic because she's got so many characteristics like decision-making skills, leadership, like structure, all of those things underpin this, but she's just such a fun, amazing person to be around, and I feel very lucky to, share a business with her.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, guys. What daily habit makes you a better founder? Who's up first?
I think my daily habit, I obsess over my calendar. And I probably am obsessing over it even more at the moment and making sure I don't waste time on silly things that aren't needed. And I think that makes me better because sometimes that is ignoring what's in my calendar and spending time with a person in real life, working through something. And sometimes it's closing the door and punching out some work. So I think I do obsess daily over my calendar.
What makes me? I think it's a real skill to know where your time is best placed. And I'm still figuring that out. And I also, so I'm kind of working through that, but I think, maybe a year ago I would have just tried to do a bit of everything, and now I'm kind of being a bit more selective. I'm like, I don't need to be in that meeting. Like, Bec's in that meeting. She should be there way more than I need to. I'm just going to be sitting there like doodling on a, in my notebook. So, I mean, that kind of working to that. And I think also I'm really trying to work on how I communicate, because I have this expectation that people can read my mind, and so I can't
not just read, but read your mind.
Yeah, read my mind. So yes,
because most people can read.
Yeah, most people can read. We don't, but and that extends from. So I might half say things and not even realize that I've half said it. And Bec will sometimes finish the thought or finish the sentence if she's in and that's we've obviously worked together for so long, but I can't assume that our accountant, our finance assistant has that capability. So if I'm asking someone to do something for me, I'm spending a lot more time like reading and rereading, communications and thinking about how I say things to people. So even though it might take a little bit longer, it ultimately gets a better result because people don't have to cobble together things to try and understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wish people could read parts of my mind, but not all of it. It'd be some pretty weird stuff, but yeah, the work stuff maybe.
If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I think for me, I would love to have dinner with Estee Lauder. Oh, sorry. We have never had this conversation. I think she would have some great stories to tell, and what a pioneer. And I can't even imagine how hard it would have been to be. I've read obviously a lot of books about her, and I've got a fascination with what she's built because it's just so enduring. But I would love to have dinner with Estee.
She would be a good one. Probably Bernard Arnault, maybe. He'd be a good one. Yeah. I mean, maybe a little. I'm trying to think of people who might be a little bit more fun, less scary. So I was like, Steve Jobs probably would be a little bit too scary. Yeah. And we're not tech. I'm not a tech fan. I have no aspirations to be. But Bernard Arnault, I mean, he gets brand. He obviously has a deep appreciation of brand.
Family,
lots of money, and obviously understands intimately the luxury space. So
that's a good one.
Maybe
can I come too?
Yes, of course. You're there. I think. Yeah, I'd need you there. I'd probably maybe struggle with the French accent after a little while. So yeah, I think he'd be great.
Awesome. All right, last question. What are you both excited for next?
I'm excited for North America. We just launched into Canada. They are just the best people and so wonderful to work with. And we're going down south from there next year. So I'm really excited about that. It feels like we're starting the brand all over again without the intimidation of 40,000 units of stock.
More like 400,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that too. I think the US and launching into the US has really challenged, everything that we've put into market, for good or bad, and challenged our way of thinking. And we've just seen so many people get it wrong. But also, if you get it right, that's it. That's the rocket ship. So there's a lot of pressure on that. So it's exciting, terrifying. And I'm having another baby in 6 weeks. So
Woohoo.
that's kind of exciting. Yeah. Although I probably am at this stage more excited about the US
than the late nights, early mornings.
Than the late nights, early mornings. Yeah.
Oh, awesome, guys. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on all the success you've had, and I look forward to following the journey.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was. Thanks for having us.
If you love this episode, make sure to check out my interview with Emma Greed on how solving a problem she was so passionate about led to the creation of Skims and Good American.
And so I do think so much of it starts with addressing things that bother you, that you find, you've got to create a solution for, because, at the end of the day, you've got to be passionate enough and sometimes crazy enough to go round and round and round to actually solve a problem.